Throughout my life, I've been told that our education system is broken. And when I look back on my own educational experiences, it's easy to see how we might believe that's true. When I was in elementary school, I was tracked into the lowest math class, not because I was tested, not because my parents were contacted, but because of the color of my skin. After my parents advocated for me, I was put into the advanced class, talented and gifted. Because my parents were both the first in their families to go to college, they knew how important it was and how important their advocacy was going to be to ensure that I had the opportunities that they did. When I was in the more advanced classes, I saw right away how much more rigorous, engaging, real-world-centered, and fun these classes were. I also saw that I was one of the only kids who looked like me. It was my first lesson in structural racism and implicit bias. I was 10. I learned the shame of low expectations. I doubted my own intelligence and capabilities. As an eager student, I was quite a rule follower and loved pleasing adults. It was my first lesson in learning that not every adult would see the beauty and the brilliance in me. And it was my job and my family's job to ensure that they did. Also in elementary school, there was a year where I was repeatedly called the N-word and a troll doll. When I approached my teacher about these and other incidents, she told me to have empathy for the white girl who bullied me because she wasn't from a middle-class background like I was. What I learned in that instance was that this girl deserved my empathy and understanding while I needed to suffer her abuses on my own. In high school, when I found out that I got into Brown University, I was so excited to tell all of my friends. There was a party later on that night, and when I showed up and excitedly told everyone, I was approached by one of my white male friends, and he asked me to my face how it felt to get into an Ivy League school just because I was black. I played 3 sports, had almost a 4.0 GPA, sang in 3 choirs, did other extracurriculars, volunteered every week, and worked on top of it. And what I learned in that moment is that even many of my closest white friends would never believe that I deserved achievements such as that. Now, it wasn't all bad. I had teachers who saw something in me, who encouraged me to apply to top colleges and universities across the country, who were there for me during the one time my parents were not able to support me, when I had my first girlfriend. They sat with me while I cried and shuddered in their offices, not knowing what was going to happen to me. They made me feel whole and lovable when I was called disgusting names by my peers. My experiences as a student led me to want to become a teacher, fueled my passion for education. I wanted to be the teacher that I always needed and that oftentimes I did have. When I began teaching in East New York, Brooklyn, I right away saw the brilliance and the beauty in my 4th grade students. But I also saw that they had already been jaded by so many of the same messages that I had received as a student. In some ways, I was able to be revolutionary. We talked about racism. We talked about the stereotypes that they face, not only in our school building, but in the broader world around us. We went on trips to plays, to baseball games, to Coney Island. They inspired me to be the best version of myself I could be. But the system isn't set up for teachers to be revolutionary actors. And despite my efforts, I also complied with a system that was not designed to bring out their brilliance. I taught test prep for months, even though I knew that was not the way to unlock their brilliance. I even let my own biases play out in the classroom in ways that I am ashamed to admit. We don't create spaces for teachers to be able to talk about their own struggles, their own biases, their own needs to be whole, happy people. My experiences as a teacher led me to become a teacher coach. And as a teacher coach working all across New York City, I saw that the conditions in my school were not unique. They were the rule. Kids all across the city were being stripped of their potential, being dehumanized, not being taught that their own histories, their own peoples, their own cultures had contributed so much to this country and to our world. They were being funneled into juvenile detention centers and ultimately prison. They were being tracked into special education classrooms in which they did not belong. They too were being impacted by the insidiousness of low expectations. After working as a teacher coach and seeing how hard my teachers worked, every single one of them entering the system to be that teacher that we all had, and every single one of them struggling every day to keep that commitment at the forefront and to fight against a system that was not set up for them to do the work that they wanted to do. I then started working in nonprofits, eventually becoming executive director, and I saw themes all across the state of Washington that confirmed this. Again, these stories are not the exception, they are the rule. As a program officer at the Rakes Foundation, I'm able to see what's happening in education all across the country. And it finally led me to actually take a step back and unpack what is the history of the education system here in the United States. What was it designed to do? Who was it designed for? It's pretty incredible that I could have gone my entire career up to that point without actually knowing that. So I started by listening to leaders, reading as many books as I could, watching different films, and what I discovered is that our education system was developed in the late 1800s based largely on European systems, specifically that in Germany. The goal was not to unlock the genius in every child. The goal was not to inspire their curiosity and to help them follow their passions, to help them become the leaders that our world needs. The goal of our education system was to sort, track, and indoctrinate. As Thomas Jefferson said, to separate the wheat from the chaff. We were funneling certain people who were deemed as privileged and intelligent enough into elite status. And the rest of us were forced into a compulsory schooling model that prepared us for jobs to serve the elite. We also know that education was kept from communities like African Americans for centuries because of the power that education can hold. Education was largely seen as unnecessary for women. We most certainly didn't design schools for LGBTQ students. And in the worst cases possible, we built schools like Native American boarding schools, intentionally designed to inflict cultural genocide, stripping people of their language, their histories, their cultures, their humanity. The motto of the Carlisle Indian School was literally, "Kill the Indian to save the man." Education is not and has never been neutral. This is the real foundation of our education system: to oppress, to assimilate, to indoctrinate, and to control. In Seattle, where I live, a city on the west coast of the United States, we've been having conversations about closing gaps for 70 years. 70 years. We've failed generation after generation of young people, families, and communities, and we still don't consider this a crisis. We still prioritize the good intentions of adults in our system over the real needs of our students, over real change. We're afraid to have the conversations that would actually move the needle for young people because they're not politically safe. Because not everyone wants to talk about oppression. Because not everyone understands the history of our system. And who suffers? Most certainly there are adults suffering in our system, but this is on the backs of our children, the exact people we should be looking out for the most. When I dug into the history more, it was clear to me that we needed to address the rotting foundation of American education. It made me think about a remodel in our own house. No superficial remodel of this system can possibly overcome a cracked and rotting foundation. We know this to be true. And while there have been a lot of hardworking, passionate people, myself included, working on this problem for decades, the changes we've seen are minimal at best, and at worst, we've actually seen gaps grow. At the college level, the college completion gap has grown between African American students and white students in the last 30 years. We've made things worse. None of us entered this system in order to do that. But it's a bigger problem than any one of us. This is not a problem about people, it's a problem of design. And we need to liberate ourselves to take dramatically different steps, to have real conversations, and to push ourselves and each other to do something dramatically different. Through my work, I've had the opportunity to learn from incredible, ordinary people doing extraordinary things all across our system. Folks like Nate Gibbs Bowling, the 2016 Washington State Teacher of the Year and runner-up for National Teacher of the Year. Nate teaches a wide variety of histories in his classes and even creates space for his young people to talk about what they need to do if they're pulled over by the police, what their rights are. Folks like Chris Chapman and his team in the Office of Equity in Oakland Unified School District, who developed our nation's first Office of African American Male Achievement, when then Superintendent Tony Smith realized they were sending more black young men to prison than to college. As a school district, that is unethical. So they established this office to create the freedom and the space to actually listen to young men, families, and communities, and redesign elements of the education system to better support them. In classes like the Manhood Development course, black male teachers teach young black men about the stereotypes they're indoctrinated with, as they call it, the matrix, and how they can lead through that, how they can buffer themselves against stereotypes. They learn about the histories of Africans and African Americans that I never got to learn about in my K-12 experience. They're empowered to believe that they can change things in our country. They have career pathway programs that connect them to meaningful opportunities in their own communities. And they are not sent the message to get out. They are sent the message that where they are from and who they are is beautiful, and that they can stay and be the kings that they know they are. There are many other educators doing incredibly important things. Groups like Wildflower, intentionally diverse schools that are embedding schools back in our community, not isolating young people away from what's happening in the world. All of these examples show one thing. Every single one of us, regardless of where we are situated in this system, can be more revolutionary. Reform is not enough. We must be revolutionary. If we know and understand and can fully own what this system was designed to do, I would push you to consider this. Think about other systems that we've designed in this country to oppress, sort, and track. Did we reform them? Or did we revolutionize or even abolish them? We've all been told that public education is a public good, but it has not lived up to that potential for far too many young people by design. I had the opportunity to hear Art Longworth and the Concerned Lifers organization at Monroe Penitentiary in Monroe, Washington recently. A group of incredible men quoting Maslow and talking about other psychologists and thought leaders. It was a humbling, vulnerable, deeply human experience to see these men who've been shuffled through our foster care, homelessness, and education, pushed out of our education system, who have the ability to make our country and our world so much better, their potential and their brilliance locked away with no chance of parole. Art said something that I thought was incredibly powerful, and I asked if it was okay to share it with all of you. He said, before you can reform a system, you must acknowledge the harm it has caused. And you must make a real commitment to not cause additional harm. It's time to wake up, take stock, and make amends. We cannot fix this system until we acknowledge what it was designed to do and the ways in which we are all complicit. We didn't design this system. It's not our fault. But once we know better, it is our job to do better. Thank you.